Hey everyone, welcome back. I've been seeing a lot about Shopify stock lately. Seems like everyone's talking about it. And actually, you sent over this article from the Motley Fool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's called Three Reasons to Buy Shopify Stock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no tomorrow. So obviously, that's pretty bullish.
Yeah, and whenever I hear something like that, I always try to approach those glowing reviews with a healthy dose of skepticism, right?
Right.
Gotta unpack it a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's do that. And first, for anyone who, might not be super familiar, can you just explain what Shopify is and why it's getting so much attention?
Sure. Yeah. So at its core, Shopify is a company that provides software for businesses to set up and run their own online stores.
Okay.
And they provide pretty much everything. So think of it like a comprehensive toolkit. It's everything from website design and shopping carts to payments and inventory management, even marketing tools, all in one place.
So it's like a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to sell online.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't that what Amazon is for? I mean, why not just sell through them?
Right. And that's what makes Shopify so interesting. The article actually calls them the un-Amazon.
Okay.
And I think that's actually a really great way to put it.
Yeah.
You see, with Shopify, it's all about offering an alternative for merchants who want more control over their brand and their customer relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Something that they really don't get on a massive platform like Amazon.
Right, because it's like you're just another seller on their platform.
Right, you become just another face in the crowd.
Yeah.
And, and this is something that's becoming increasingly important as Amazon itself gets more and more crowded. And, they even start competing directly with the sellers who use their platform.
Oh, wow.
So you can see why a lot of merchants are kind of wary of building their entire business on someone else's land, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and then all of a sudden, you don't have control over that basket anymore.
Right, exactly.
So Shopify is all about empowering those merchants to be independent.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And if you look at their recent performance, it seems like a lot of merchants are really drawn to that.
Yeah, and the article actually mentions some pretty impressive numbers.
Oh, yeah?
In Q3 of 2024, Shopify facilitated almost $70 billion in sales, generating $2.2 billion in revenue for themselves.
Wow.
And both of those figures are up significantly from last year.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, especially when you consider that the economy overall has been slowing down.
Yeah.
Consumers are being cautious, but Shopify still managed to pull off 6 consecutive quarters of over 25% revenue growth.
Wow.
Now, to be fair, they did recently sell off their logistics business, so that impacts the overall picture a little bit.
Okay.
But still, very impressive.
Yeah, 6 quarters in a row with that kind of growth. I mean, they must be onto something, right?
Yeah, it seems like it. But, the real question is that sustainable?
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I mean, past performance doesn't necessarily guarantee future success, right?
Right.
But, I mean, are there any, factors that suggest that Shopify could continue on this path?
Yeah, I mean, there are. One of the big ones is just the changing landscape of e-commerce itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's online shopping changing?
Well, it's moving beyond those giant marketplaces like Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Social media and targeted marketing are allowing brands to find their own customers, and really cultivate their own following.
Okay.
Which actually plays right into Shopify's strengths.
Right.
Because they provide the tools that businesses need to thrive in this evolving e-commerce world.
So it's like they're the enabler for those businesses that want to, be their own thing. Have that direct connection with customers.
Exactly.
Not just be one of a million on Amazon.
Right. And that actually has some pretty significant implications for small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Mm.
I mean, it really levels the playing field because it means that they can compete, without having to play by the rules of the giants.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I feel like the internet is, dominated by just a few companies.
For sure.
So it's kind of refreshing to see a company like Shopify out there, helping those smaller players.
Absolutely. I think it's a really positive development.
Okay, so we've established that Shopify is growing like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're offering this really compelling alternative to, the Amazon model.
Mm-hmm.
But just how big is this opportunity really? What are we talking about in terms of market potential?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting because despite all the hype around e-commerce, we're still in the very early stages.
Okay.
Believe it or not, only about 16% of retail sales in the U.S. actually happen online.
Really? Only 16%. That seems so low.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, with everything being online these days.
But it just goes to show that there's still massive room for growth. I mean, the vast majority of retail sales are still happening in brick-and-mortar stores.
Wow.
And that's really the key takeaway here. That 16% figure suggests that Shopify's potential market is way bigger than what they're currently capturing.
So that's a growth investor dream.
Yeah.
Huge untapped potential.
Yeah, pretty much. And to make it even better, the industry projections support this. Straits Research, which is a market research firm, forecasts that the global e-commerce software market is going to grow at over 12% per year through 2032.
Wow.
So that's a huge opportunity for a company like Shopify.
Yeah, that's incredible. 12% for the next, 8 years.
Yeah.
But what factors could affect that growth? I mean, either positively or negatively. Are there any, roadblocks we should be thinking about?
Oh, well, I mean, there's always going to be unforeseen circumstances. But one thing that's continuing to push things forward is just the development of technology.
Yeah.
That's constantly making online shopping more convenient and accessible. Things like mobile payments, augmented reality, personalized recommendations. Yeah, all of these are constantly improving the online experience.
For sure.
And then you have the whole global reach of e-commerce. Shopify makes it easier than ever for businesses to sell to customers anywhere in the world.
So the barriers to entry are shrinking.
Exactly. And Shopify's platform is really capitalizing on that. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Okay, so the potential upside is huge. But what about Shopify's specific outlook for the future? What are they saying?
Well, they're feeling pretty good. In their recent earnings report, Shopify predicted continued revenue growth in the mid to high 20s% rate.
No.
With similar growth in gross profits. That's a really strong signal, especially in today's economy.
So you mentioned gross profits growing, and the article also talks about something called profit-taking pressure in relation to, Shopify's stock surge.
Right.
Can you just explain those a little?
Yeah. So when Shopify talks about gross profit growing, they mean the revenue that they keep after paying for the direct costs of providing their services. It's a really important measure of their profitability.
Gotcha.
Now, profit-taking pressure refers to what can happen when a stock price jumps up really quickly, like Shopify's did after their Q3 report.
Okay.
Some investors might decide to sell their shares to, lock in those gains, which can then push the price down a bit.
Right. So it's kind of like a short-term reaction, not necessarily reflective of the long term.
Exactly.
Okay. So investors were obviously excited by the positive guidance. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee, smooth sailing ahead.
Right. It's always good to be cautious after a sudden price spike.
Yeah.
But it's worth pointing out that Shopify has a history of strong rallies. They've consistently exceeded expectations.
Right.
So this jump might actually be justified.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about how Shopify is the un-Amazon.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do their financials actually look like compared to a more direct competitor like Wix, for example?
It's a great question. And, both companies operate in that same sort of website building space. But their focus and financials are a bit different.
Okay.
If you look at, let's say, operating margins, which basically measure how much profit a company makes for every dollar of revenue, Shopify generally has higher margins than Wix. So that suggests that they're a little bit more efficient at turning revenue into profit.
Okay.
Another important metric is customer acquisition cost.
Okay.
Basically, how much does it cost to acquire a new customer?
Yeah.
And for Shopify, those costs have been trending downwards.
Okay.
Which is a really good sign because it means they're getting better at attracting new customers without having to spend as much.
That makes sense. So from a financial perspective, it sounds like they're actually outperforming a more direct competitor.
Yeah, it seems like it. And that adds a whole other layer to that un-Amazon idea, right? It's not just that they're carving out a different path.
Yeah.
It's that they're doing it really effectively.
Yeah, for sure. But before we get too carried away with all the positives, let's talk about some potential downsides.
Okay.
I mean, the Motley Fool article was super bullish.
Right.
But what are some reasons why someone might not want to buy Shopify stock?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We got to think critically here. We can't just accept the good stuff.
Right.
So one thing that comes to mind is platform security.
Okay.
I mean, Shopify handles a ton of sensitive data, customer data and financial transactions.
Yeah.
And if there's a major security breach,
Right.
that could really damage the reputation and erode customer trust.
Yeah.
Another thing to think about is the regulatory environment.
Okay.
E-commerce is still, kind of a newish industry.
Yeah.
And governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate it.
Right.
So changes in laws or regulations, especially around data privacy and online sales taxes, could create some hurdles for Shopify and its merchants.
Okay, yeah, those are really good points. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. They face some real challenges. But the article also argues that Shopify is actually really well positioned to capitalize on, the future of e-commerce. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's where the un-Amazon concept becomes particularly relevant.
Okay.
Amazon is this giant marketplace, and they basically control the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Merchants on Amazon have very limited control over things like their branding, their customer data, even their pricing.
Wow.
Whereas Shopify empowers them to be independent.
Right.
They own their relationships with their customers. They can build their brand however they want and experiment with different approaches. And that flexibility could be a really big advantage in the long run.
So you're saying that Shopify's focus on the individual merchant, which we just talked about as the strength, could also be like a key advantage in the future of e-commerce.
Exactly. And that actually ties into the second reason why the Motley Fool is so bullish on them, international expansion.
Right.
By empowering merchants to sell globally,
Yeah.
Shopify's tapping into this massive and growing market.
Right.
And because they're not trying to be a marketplace themselves, they can avoid some of those headaches that come with operating in different countries.
Oh, yeah, all the different rules and regulations.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so the article had 3 reasons. We've talked about 2 of them. So what was the third one?
Oh, yeah. The third one was their app ecosystem.
Oh, right. They have like a whole app store or something.
They do.
Okay.
They have a Shopify app store, and it offers tons of third-party apps that extend the functionality of their platform.
Yep.
It's a key part of their strategy. Basically, they created this really vibrant ecosystem where developers can create all these cool new tools for merchants.
Okay.
And Shopify just focuses on its core platform.
So they're kind of like, the Apple App Store,
Exactly.
but applied to e-commerce.
Right. Create a strong foundation and then let the developers run wild.
I like it. But, how does that translate into, real benefits for investors?
Well, it creates what we call a network effect.
Okay.
As more developers build apps for Shopify, it becomes more attractive to merchants.
Makes sense.
And as more merchants use Shopify, it becomes more attractive to developers. It's this positive feedback loop that can drive growth and create a real advantage over competitors.
Right. So it's like a win-win for everyone. Okay. So we've got a rapidly growing market, this unique value proposition for merchants, strong financials, a huge app ecosystem, a history of blowing past expectations.
Yeah.
That's a lot of checks in the pros column.
Definitely.
But we also talked about some potential downsides.
Yeah.
Security risks and that, uncertain regulatory environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like Shopify is this company with, a ton of upside, but also some inherent risks, right?
I think that's fair to say. And that's why it's so important for investors to do their own research, really understand the nuances of the company and the industry. It's not just a simple decision.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, we've covered a lot in just this first part as our deep dive into Shopify, but I want to go back to that un-Amazon concept one more time before we move on.
Okay.
Because you mentioned earlier that it could be a key differentiator in the future of e-commerce.
Yeah.
But could Shopify's focus on individual merchants actually be a threat to these giants like Amazon? Or are they both going to, kind of coexist, each catering to their own little niche?
Ooh, that's an interesting question, and one that I think we should explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, I think so too.
It really is like this classic David and Goliath story,
Yeah.
Can Shopify, with its focus on these individual merchants, actually challenge, the massive Amazon?
Yeah, it's a great story, but I'm just curious. Is it realistic? Can they actually disrupt this e-commerce giant? Or are they just going to kind of like coexist, both catering to different parts of the market?
Well, let's think about it this way. Amazon's strength is really in its scale. It's massive, and they can offer just a huge selection of products at, really competitive prices.
Right.
They've got this incredibly efficient logistics network,
Mm-hmm.
and they control a big chunk of the market. But that same scale can also be a weakness.
Oh, interesting.
Because, like we talked about before, a lot of merchants are worried about becoming too reliant on Amazon.
Right.
Especially as Amazon starts competing directly with them.
Yeah, that's kind of scary if you built your whole business on Amazon
Yeah.
and then they decide to, undercut you,
Right.
launch their own product.
Exactly.
So it's like Amazon offers convenience and reach, but it's also like you're giving up a lot of control.
Yeah. And you're kind of at their mercy, right?
Yeah.
So That's where Shopify's approach really stands out.
Okay.
Because by letting those merchants be independent, it gives them a sense of, ownership
Right.
and control that you just don't get with Amazon.
Yeah.
And this is especially appealing to brands who are really focused on, building their own unique identity and fostering those direct relationships with their customers.
So in a way, Shopify is kind of betting on this idea that, like, shoppers are going to start to care more about that authenticity.
Yeah.
Like, they want to engage directly with the brand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the lowest price or, the fastest delivery.
Right.
It's about those values and that connection.
Yeah.
And if that trend keeps going, it could be really good for Shopify.
Okay.
Think about it as more people prioritize those values, they're more likely to, seek out those brands with their own online presence.
Yeah.
Not just browse through a giant generic marketplace.
Right. It's like they want to find those hidden gems. Okay, but let's be real. Amazon is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So do you think there's actually space for both of these business models to be successful?
I think there is. Some people are always going to just want the cheapest and fastest option.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people, Amazon's probably going to stay on top.
But for people who are looking for something unique or want to support small businesses or just value a more personalized experience,
Yeah.
Shopify-powered stores offer that.
It's kind of like two different internets.
Yeah.
You've got the massive platforms like, Amazon and Facebook. They're aggregating everything.
Right.
And then you've got this whole other ecosystem of, independent creators and businesses, and they're using tools like Shopify to connect directly.
I like that analogy. And, it really highlights how Shopify can be successful even if Amazon stays huge.
Mm-hmm.
They might even benefit from Amazon's success because as Amazon grows, it actually pushes more and more merchants to look for alternatives.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And Shopify is right there to welcome them.
It's interesting because it makes this whole, should I invest or not, question even more complicated.
Right.
On one hand, you've got a company that's growing really fast. They've got a unique model. The market is huge.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other hand, you have this giant competitor lurking in the background.
Yeah. It creates both challenges and opportunities.
Exactly. So we need to think about this from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, it's not a simple yes or no decision.
So for our listeners out there, the ones who are actually trying to decide if they should invest,
Right.
what are some of the key takeaways they should be thinking about?
Well, first things first, they need to know their own goals.
Right.
And how much risk they're comfortable with.
Yeah, because Shopify is definitely a growth stock.
Yeah.
So it could go way up, but it's also, more risky than something that's slower and more established.
Exactly. So if you're looking for something really stable, low risk, Shopify's probably not the best fit.
Yeah.
But if you can handle some ups and downs and you're excited about the potential for growth,
Yeah.
then Shopify could be a really good option.
Okay, good advice. And we should also say, investing in any individual stock is risky.
Right. There are no guarantees.
Exactly. But the more you understand about the company, the industry, the better decisions you can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Okay, so we talked about the what of Shopify,
Yeah.
and the why.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about the how.
Okay.
If our listener decides they want to invest,
Yeah.
what are the actual practical steps?
Well, step one is to open a brokerage account.
Okay.
There's tons of online brokerages these days, and they all have different features and fees.
Mm-hmm.
So do your research. Pick the one that works best for you.
Yeah, good advice. And once you have that account, then you can really start digging into Shopify.
Exactly.
Look at their financials, read reports, see what the analysts are saying.
Yep. Stay informed.
And don't forget about diversification.
Right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. But before we let our listener go and do all that research, any other final thoughts you think would be helpful? Anything they should keep an eye on?
I think the most important thing is for investors to, really understand how to evaluate these opportunities.
Right.
Don't just follow the crowd or listen to what everyone else is saying.
Yeah, even us.
Exactly. Learn how to read financial statements, understand those key metrics, analyze the trends.
Become an informed investor,
Right.
not just a follower. I love that.
Yeah. It's all about taking control of your money. That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first, 2 parts of our Shopify Deep Dive. We talked about how they work, who they're up against, what their future might look like, and, the risks and rewards for investors.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up completely, I want to leave our listener with one last thing to think about. So we've been talking about Shopify as the un-Amazon.
Yeah.
This different way for merchants to do business online.
Right.
But what if we kind of flip that around?
Oh, okay.
What if by empowering all these individual merchants, Shopify actually ends up changing all of e-commerce?
Interesting.
Even influencing, the big guys like Amazon.
Yeah, that's a really thought-provoking idea. It's easy to see this as just a head-to-head competition.
Right.
But maybe Shopify's impact is actually much broader than that.
Yeah.
Maybe they're actually shifting how we think about online business as a whole.
It's like they're creating this new model.
Yeah.
And even if they don't beat Amazon,
Right.
those changes they're making could still impact the entire landscape.
Exactly. Think about it. Amazon built its empire on, convenience and low prices.
Yeah.
But as consumers become more, sophisticated in their tastes, they start to want authenticity. They want to connect directly with the brands.
Right.
Even Amazon might have to change the way they do things.
It's like they're already starting to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're launching their own brands, trying to curate a better shopping experience. It's almost like they're copying Shopify.
Right. And if that trend continues, we might see a future where even the biggest companies start to incorporate some of these ideas of individual empowerment.
Right.
Simply because that's what people want.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So this whole Shopify deep dive, even if you don't end up investing,
Right.
it's shown us how consumer behavior is changing the entire online world.
It's a great example of how even in a world with these huge, dominant companies, innovation can still come from unexpected places.
Yeah.
And those new ideas can have a ripple effect, changing the game for everyone.
Okay, I love that takeaway. So, listener, whether you decide to buy Shopify or not, just pay attention to these trends.
Right.
The future of e-commerce is going to be way more interesting than you might think.
And that's what makes it so exciting. This constant change opens up new opportunities for everyone.
Okay, before we sign off, any last bits of advice for our listeners who are, still doing their research?
Sure. Keep a close eye on how many new merchants are choosing Shopify. That's a really good indicator of, how attractive their platform is.
Right.
And pay attention to their international growth, too.
Right.
Are they making progress in new markets? That'll tell you a lot about their long-term potential.
Awesome advice. So basically, Shopify is a company on the cutting edge of this whole e-commerce revolution.
Yeah.
And they're not just competing with Amazon. They might actually be changing the rules of the game.
It's definitely a story worth following.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive into Shopify. We hope this was helpful, maybe even a little bit inspiring.
It was a great conversation. Always fun to look beyond the headlines.
And to our listener, keep learning, keep exploring, and as always, happy investing.